Welcome to this week's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Sarah Walter, manager at ECS Financial Services. Thanks for joining me, Sarah.
Thanks, Jesse. Looking forward.
It's yeah, I mean, it's great to have you on the program. It's been great, digging in and working with you for the last, I want to say, probably 18 months.
Yeah.
So excited to kind of share your story with the rest of the equipment finance community.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So, Sarah, for the individuals watching or listening that have yet to meet you, do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and your career to date?
Sure. So today I work at ECS Financial, but I started in equipment finance about 16 years ago now. Actually, it was July 2008, I guess. So I was right out of college. I wasn't totally sure what I was going to do post-graduation, and kind of through friends found this job and applied for an accounting position at an equipment leasing company, and thought, hey, it's a full-time gig. Let's see how this goes. And 16 years later, sitting here still in equipment finance, but I was working for an equipment leasing company. It was a wholly owned leasing company of a bank at the time. And so I kind of got my feet wet with lease accounting and sales tax and lease booking and different things like that. At one point, we opened a Canadian subsidiary, and so I had offered to kind of run that, if you will, from an accounting standpoint, kind of see what that looked like from a holistic perspective. So I got to see the portfolio, right, from the whole view, and kind of dig into some of the differences of, US versus Canadian dollars and exchange rates and how that all kind of works. And over time, just kind of, continued to work my way up there. Eventually, I became a supervisor and had a couple people reporting to me, and was kind of overseeing the lease booking and portfolio management for them. Went through a couple mergers and acquisitions and decided that big banking wasn't for me. And so in May of 2021, I joined ECS, and I've been here for the last 3 years or so. And so I knew of ECS from the industry, right? Well-known name in equipment finance, and had kind of worked with Nancy and done some RFPs and stuff before. And so I applied for a position, and here I am. So at ECS now, I'm a manager now, more in the lease servicing, lease accounting area, which was a role that we were looking to fill as Nancy kind of made her slow exit to retirement this past April. And so, yeah, it's been a good fit for me. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. So a few things I wanted to unpack out of that.
Sure.
So in college, they didn't have a class on lease accounting.
No, so my undergrad is actually in finance. And so I fell into an accounting position, and actually through a program at the bank, I did get my master's degree in accounting. And so that was kind of where how I landed where I landed. Yeah.
Awesome. And then, when you sit there and you start getting into some lease accounting and the way different things are set up.
Yeah.
It didn't scare you.
None of this is taught in school. Yeah. The debits and the credits part carries over, but the rest of it, not so much.
Yeah. Fair. And then looking at Canadian, I guess I almost call it Canada. Canada just has provincial taxes, so it's a lot easier than our tax code here.
Yes.
So
corporate tax is a little bit easier as well. So yeah, the whole concept of VAT tax everywhere else in the world, right, makes a lot of sense to those of us in the US who are like, what do you mean? So, coming up with a process to track and pay what we should pay and get back what we should get back, and all of that was a learning curve, but as with anything.
What do you mean? It should be state, city, county, town, street. Yes.
Fire department. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. You sit there and look at some of the taxes, and you're just like, oh, that's where ECS
Water
comes into play.
District.
Nope.
Yep.
Nope. Jesse, what are your thoughts on taxes?
No.
I have no thoughts.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Sarah.
Sure.
And Do you mind just kind of introducing an ECS and
Sure.
a little bit more about the company?
Sure. So ECS is a full service accounting firm, CPA firm, started in 1962, so been around a little over 60 years now. Started as a more traditional accounting firm, and has morphed into what it is today, with a lot of specialized services, certainly in equipment finance, and the knowledge that we have here around the specifics of lease accounting and audit for leasing companies and corporate tax for leasing companies, sales tax, property tax, all those kinds of things. And then, of course, some consulting as needed as well. And so, we do kind of soup to nuts 1040s for personal income tax to complicated corporate income tax and all the things in between. And then, of course, lease servicing is kind of the area where I sit, and lease accounting and things like that. And in that area, same thing, it can be, we need help with month-end reports, or just sales tax, or just property tax, or can you help us book leases? And, we have new companies come to us, right? New startup leasing companies. And so kind of get them off on the right foot in all facets, right? And so we help them, look at all of the pieces of their business and what that means for them, and how we can get them set up right off the get-go.
So from an ECS customer base perspective, I know we have over 100 different clients just in equipment finance. Would you say kind of the ideal, or just the makeup of our client base, is more startups, or do we have more tenured organizations that come to us? Not to say they haven't grown with ECS, right? Yes. But I'm just trying to think of the average customer that kind of comes to us.
Sure. I think both, right? We definitely excel in the startups and helping people get off and running, from, getting onto a lease platform, whatever software that they choose, from a GL setup perspective and best practices. And then, as they grow with us, that's, always fun to see. And then we have, large banks that need help with equipment, finance and lease accounting. And so we oftentimes, for larger companies, do some pieces of the puzzle, whether that be month-end reporting and sales tax, property tax, or consulting, audit, things like that. So it kind of allows us to see different companies from all different perspectives, and then use that knowledge that we have from somebody else. And, we've seen this in the industry and that, and have you ever thought of this? So, yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that. I know ideally the picture perfect customer is one who hasn't done anything they shouldn't potentially have done.
Yes. Isn't that the truth?
Where you don't have to go and unwind anything. You can just start with a clear slate. However, it's not a perfect world.
No, and I think that, for those companies that come to us, we'll call it midstream, right? Some life before ECS in the industry, and then are looking to us to help them sort of, reevaluate, clean up what our best practices, what are we not doing right that we should be, how can we streamline things? Those are also things we definitely excel in, and, can do some of that consulting, and then kind of take their portfolio and run with it. Even, midstream 600 leases, 1,000 leases. So all good.
Perfect. Yeah. Same on the consulting side. You sit there and you try to get into, okay, this is what's about to happen. Can we just start now? And it's like, no, we're there. We'll let you know if we need you. 6 months later, it's
we need you.
It's on fire. It's like, we need you. I'm like,
yeah. Come on, and certainly for sales tax and other things too, you get too far down that path without having a good process, and it can be very hard to unravel. So
yeah, you don't want to mess with taxes.
No.
So from an organization perspective, I know you're headquartered in Northbrook, Illinois. From a remote perspective, what does the makeup of the company look like?
Sure. So we have an office in Northbrook, north suburbs of Chicago, just north of O'Hare. And then we have remote staff, around the Midwest, and kind of branching out as needed, right? Where experts are that we can pick up, certainly are doing that as well. So, a lot of remote work, or, a lot of people love the office. So, you never
Yeah,
know, to each their
never,
own.
never know. And would you, and I don't know if you have this number, so no big deal if you don't, the average tenure of an ECS client?
Ooh, so we have a lot of people who've been here probably over 7 years now, with a lot in the, 20+ year range. So a couple of our partners have been here for over 20 years. Nancy was 40 right when she retired. Sam's been around forever. So yeah, definitely a lot of people with a lot of years of experience around here. So
And then when you look at that customer base, I would say, I mean, there's customers that have been with you guys probably since inception
yeah,
for probably
yes,
20, 30, 40 years.
yes. And that, ebbs and flows and morphs into, this project or that audit or, this thing or that. But yeah, absolutely. It's fun to have clients around for a lot of years.
Sure, sure. And then I'm going to change gears a little bit.
Sure.
So going from a bank-owned equipment finance organization to now a service provider, um, let's talk about that transition, if you don't mind, because
Sure.
being, you were a bank, right? A bank equipment finance company. Now it's like so you just have to satisfy that particular business unit. Now it's like, okay, Sarah, we have 150 clients.
I think that was the biggest transition for me, and seeing, you always know the way you do things and, the terminology that your leasing company uses and all of those things. And then you come and it's like, okay, work on these 5 clients to start. And this person calls an operating lease, whatever. And, just terminology around documentation and the way deals are structured for different companies. Sometimes they mean the same thing, sometimes they're slightly different. So I think that was the biggest transition for me, and the biggest learning curve was, I knew what I knew for 13 years, right? And a master lease agreement was this, and a lease schedule was this, and, this kind of thing, and, pricing and things like that. And, everybody prices a little different, and everybody's risk tolerance is a little different, and things like that. And so, I could no longer assume that I knew what I knew before. So I think that was the biggest transition for me in terms of going from industry to service provider. But I think it came with a lot of pros too, right? So, being able to take what I knew from the lessor perspective and then be able to sit on the service provider side, but understand the lessor perspective is a unique position for me. And, I still take things that I know and learned, and, there's what you should do for accounting, and then there's sometimes the, business decision that you make, right? And so as a CPA firm, we're always, of course, advising clients on the correct accounting decisions. But understanding how the business side of it works and why you may make a certain business decision, I think is definitely a unique perspective from where I sit today.
I mean, you just hit the nail on the head, and I've just been a service provider for my 20 years in equipment finance, so I really don't
Not
know
just.
the other side. I
Yeah,
don't really know the other side.
for sure.
I think of it more as you just had to satisfy that one particular group, and now
Yeah.
it's like, okay, how do I satisfy this broad swath of clients with diverse needs? It's no longer about that company; it's about others as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a different mindset, but obviously you're good at what you do for a living, so I don't think the
Well,
transition was that hard.
we obviously also had service providers. I filed our sales tax, but, we had service providers in other areas. And so I was used to working with service providers, for other things. So it was, audit and, other tax related things. So it was somewhat of an easy transition because I was still
Okay.
using, leasing platforms that I was used to, and, accounting systems that I knew. And so, I had that level of knowledge so that when you're learning other things, you have transferable skills. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I just there's just been because a lot of people just move back and forth,
Yeah.
and you just have to ask that question because it's like, wait a minute, this is such a vast thing that I have to do now, opposed to being more
Well, I think it's
siloed.
probably more common the other way, right? You probably go from service provider to industry more than you go the opposite way.
It's fair, completely fair. So I'm gonna change gears again to talk about kind of some industry like associations and kind of what they've meant to your career, Sarah, to date. So from an ELFA perspective, or ELFA, we'll just start there. I guess, do you remember your first conference?
Ooh, I don't.
No, you have to date yourself here. You don't have to date yourself.
I remember my first conferences with ECS, but I don't remember. I guess I had done principles of leasing through ELFA was probably, and that wasn't necessarily a conference, but my first foray into ELFA events, if you will.
What was your first conference?
Probably Women in Leasing.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I'd done, maybe not like service providers or, software platform conferences and things like that.
Conferences,
I've done some, tax related things and stuff like that, but probably ELFA Women's was probably my first ELFA true conference, if you will.
Perfect. And that was the one in the backyard there in Chicago.
Yeah. So met some people that I probably would have never otherwise met in the industry, right? Sure. Have go out to dinner and placed with people that you don't know, and they can become fast friends, and people that you reach out to when you have questions, and vice versa, and then you can look for them at other conferences, and you always have a friendly face that you're like, hey, I know that person, until it becomes a little bit more more and more people every time you go. So,
and if someone's on the fence in regards to why they should go to that conference, any advice?
So I think as women in the workforce, while it's becoming more common, and there's a lot of women out there, there's certainly industries where it's still very male dominant, and I think that this is one of them. And I think from a female standpoint, sitting there with 300-400 women, I think it is at this point now, is very cool, right? And not that there's not men in the room that are, supporters of women in equipment finance, but really getting to know women and, talking about the same, trials and, things that, not that men don't go through, but, careers for women can be different than men, and, maintaining that household and other things too. So I think for me, connecting with women who kind of sat in the same seat as I did was very rewarding. And then, again, you have that friend, right?
Sure. It's all about the FaceTime too, especially as a service provider.
Absolutely. Yes.
And then I think our paths have crossed for probably several years at the lease accounting conference.
Yep.
It's a different aspect of it now, right? Where it's like you're not running back and forth to courses as much as you want to. You're behind a booth and you're just like, hey.
Yeah. Meeting people at Lease Accountants Conference last year I went, and it's very different, those, well, from an accountant standpoint, those classes can also be very overwhelming, and there's a lot of knowledge to pack in those sessions. So, people walk out and then they're like, hey, maybe we can use you to help us with, this new accounting standard, or
not to pull away anything from the educational side of those conferences, but you know what? Just did you get all that? No? Okay, well, here, we got this.
Yeah, I mean, great information. It's a lot to pack in, so it's good stuff.
Unfortunately, I've always been on the operations side of that, so I don't quite,
I think they pair those up for a reason, right?
Yeah. Jesse, wake up. Wait, what? I'm here. I'm here. So I wanted to circle back to one thing. So you mentioned that when you first joined ECS, they send you to the Principles of Leasing workshop?
When I first joined my first equipment finance job.
Oh, they sent you. They sent you. Okay.
So actually,
Okay.
we held one. So there was a documentation, some sales credit, and accounting. And so we hosted our own principles of leasing
Okay.
one day, and had somebody come out and did the 3-day, and yeah. So
I think I did one of those. Wasn't with my first company, but it was with my second one.
okay.
Probably around like 2010,
Yeah,
2011 in Chicago.
it's a good one.
I don't know if it was that one or not, but
I can
one of the
promote
things,
that. If you're new to equipment
well,
finance, do that.
absolutely. Where I was kind of going with that question was, I know ECS, Leventis, Beacon. I guess Sam is just a
Yep.
strong proponent of investing in education for all employees. So, are you a CLFP?
I am. So that was something that we did with Beacon as well. Probably late 22, maybe 2022. And so I got my CLFP then, and that was something that I had kind of been eyeing for a number of years. And so when the opportunity presented itself at ECS, I jumped. And now that they have the online self-paced CLFP, I took 4 employees of mine through that this last year. And so 4 of them also got their CLFPs. So yeah.
Good. I don't know. The T stands alone. Holding out. Holding out.
So yeah.
I
think ECS has probably over 15 CLFPs now on staff.
Yeah. Well, and I know Dan wants pretty much everyone in Leventis to get it too,
Yeah.
but duck and dive around all that stuff. So from an, I guess, an outsourcing perspective, why should companies look to kind of outsource accounting functions as opposed to doing it in-house? And does it have to be everything, or is it more just kind of a la carte?
Sure. So I think a couple of reasons to outsource. One would be you don't always have the knowledge in-house, right? And so if you can look outside to, a firm like ECS that has the knowledge kind of built in for you, there's less sort of onboarding and teaching and training. And that's something that then we can, help you with and kind of take that piece over. We definitely have clients where we, book leases and they kind of do the other pieces of the puzzle because lease booking is more complicated. And, having somebody post cash and do invoicing is something that they can maintain in-house. And we have clients that, want to outsource for timing and resource perspective, other things, right? Month-end reporting, reconciliations, things like that. So while we have plenty of customers where we do all of those things and some, right, we have definitely the same number of clients where they're doing the a la carte and kind of, piecing what works for them. One of the things we like to do when we talk to new potential clients is really understand their business and what they're looking to do and see the way that we best fit in that. From a sales perspective, right? You'd always like to get the most business you can, but sometimes it doesn't always make sense for the client and or us. And so those are things that we try and talk through and understand from a client perspective. How can we fit in? What pieces of the puzzle can we take from you? How easy is the information to get, right? So sometimes when the information is harder to come by and, you have to ask this person or that person, it doesn't necessarily make sense for ECS to take on that. Not that we can't help, but, sometimes then that gives us an opportunity to do some consulting and what is the better ways to get that information or, how can we help you streamline that process? What would make it easier, more efficient, things like that. And then I think certainly from a startup standpoint, right, it's a lot less overhead when you don't have a lot of business yet, right? Outsourcing this piece to, a company and then it's like, we work for them only when they have the work, right? And so I think that makes most sense for startups. smaller leasing companies, right? We can kind of be that back office staff for them. You know, a lot of clients say we're an extension of them, right? We're their Northbrook office, right? And so we do a lot of that back office accounting support for a lot of clients.
Sure. I mean, I think you touched on so many good points there. Like the one that kind of resonates with me is if I was to start my own leasing company, like obviously I understand the business development side,
Yeah, right.
the rest of
But
it.
not necessarily the accounting side, right?
Well, now granted, there's some great accounting people out there that you could bring
Yes,
on,
absolutely.
but it's all about how you gonna leverage your cash flows and
Yes,
to
absolutely.
get off the ground and everything else. That yeah.
And
So
I
many
mean,
good
we have
points there,
companies
Sarah.
that as they grow and then they hire an internal accountant later and we can help train them, right?
Sure.
And, you know,
Sure.
teach them lease accounting and the software and, you know, things like that. And then we're kind of a resource to them later. So, yeah.
So my next topic of conversation is kind of industry relationships and what they've kind of meant to your career so far.
Sure. So, you know, I think people like you are a perfect example, right? Like I've met and known you for the last, I don't know, 10, 12 years in some capacity, right? And, you know, going from industry to service provider, a lot of those same people are the same, right? At different
Sure.
software providers and different conferences that you go to. And, you know, maybe they were my competitor then, and now, you know, they're somebody that I'm working with and helping. And so I think those kinds of relationships, you know, they don't always have to be clients, right? They can just
Oh,
be that friendly face and, hey, can I ask you a question? And same, right? Hey, I have a question. I know you guys do this, but and so those kinds of relationships, they matter, and then they would, you know, they withhold or withstand the test of time, right? And I think new relationships, as you meet people at new conferences and, you know, it's a new friendly face. And you know, I think I think we all say it in equipment finance, right? Everybody's so friendly. And while they might be your competitor in the marketplace, right? They're still your friend that you're sitting with at dinner at a conference and things like that.
that's a good point.
You know, obviously I had a lot of coworkers that became friends. And, you know, as people move on and, you know, it's like, well, now I know somebody there and somebody here and you meet them at a conference. And so, you know, maintaining those relationships is important.
Excellent. Yeah, and then you have a situation where you're at a software user group, I'm in a software user group, and you said,
Yeah.
hey, find these people, and you sent me a photo.
Yes.
And I'm like walking
Yes.
around like, okay, that's you,
Hey, I gotta
that's
meet those
you,
people.
that's you. And then I walk over and I'm like, but I actually knew them too from
Yes,
back in
yes,
the day
exactly, exactly.
when they used to be with your former company.
Yeah,
So I was like, oh yeah, I know.
I know them. Or people will walk up to you and be
Oh,
like, I feel like I know your name from somewhere. And then, you know, you list and, you know, maybe it was that email address or.
that's right. That's right. I do one of these. Oh
Yeah.
no. Was it after Midnight Jesty or was it
Yeah.
before Midnight Jesty? Like, give me some slack here. Give me some slack.
Yes.
I ask everyone, Sarah, who comes on the program to give me a fun fact about themselves. So, what makes you tick outside of the work that you do now at ECS?
So I spent a lot of time volunteering at church and where my son went K-8. Do a lot of volunteering and sit on the school board there. And then I spent a lot of time fundraising for Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and doing some things with them, doing their walk, and my son's fundraised for them. And so those are kind of my two things outside of here that I'm pretty passionate about, outside of course, family and things like that. But yeah, that's really where I spend my free time, if there is such a thing.
Free time. Sam better not be watching this. Free time? Free time? What are you talking
I don't.
about? And I guess just kind of in closing, Sarah, why should an organization want to do business with ECS?
Sure. I think I don't think. I know that ECS has a strong group of people who are always looking out for the best needs of our client. And so we will, tell you what you need to know. We will help you get there. We will advise you. We will, encourage you. And we have the knowledge and the tenure behind all of those things. It's a great place to work and a great company to work with. I can't say enough good things about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, Sarah.
Thanks, Jesse.
It's been fun working with you. It's been fun
Yes,
talking with you today. And I guess we'll just continue to have the fun. We'll keep going.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, no problem. Have a good day. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.